Good evening and welcome to Thursdays with NAMI. My name is Peg Morrison. I'll be your host tonight. I am the Assistant Director of NAMI North Carolina. That's the National Alliance on Mental Illness North Carolina. I am so glad y'all are here. This is a really important topic, and we're going to really get into some interesting and challenging scenarios tonight. Thursdays with NAMI is our way of building conversations and building community around the topic of mental health. In my years with NAMI, there is a question that's come up many times, and it's, how do I handle it when I get into a situation, I'm trying to talk to my loved one, and it just doesn't work? Why? Maybe they're too angry, they're too manic, they're too caught up in symptoms or a mental health challenge, and we're just not able to communicate effectively. How do we take it down a notch? Tonight's guest is Tiffanie Herring. She's written a book about this exact topic. It's called simply De-Escalate. I've been checking it out this week. It outlines the tools that we need to turn down the volume in these intense conversations. We use a specific set of skills. Some are subtle, some are straightforward. She'll be sharing the highlights with us in just a moment. As usual, the first part of our show will be an interview with our guest. Then we'll show a quick video of the week and spend time taking questions from you, members of our virtual studio audience on Facebook and Zoom. First, let's have a quick word from our sponsors. Thursdays with NAMI is funded in part by the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services, Division of Mental Health, Developmental Disabilities, and Substance Abuse Services through the Federal Community Mental Health Block Grant Fund. Thank you so much to them for their guidance and support. Now, without any further ado, Tiffanie Ritenour-Herring is a crisis intervention team coordinator with Trillium Health Resources. That's in the eastern part of the state. CIT, as it's called, is a nationally recognized training for law enforcement and other first responders covering mental health, crisis intervention, and jail diversion. The daughter of a police officer, Tiffanie is a fierce advocate and the president of NAMI in Pitt County, North Carolina. Welcome, Tiffanie.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, it's our pleasure. So we always love to know the background of our guests, and I know you have a story to tell personally, as well as some skills and insights to share. So tell us about yourself in a nutshell.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, my father was in law enforcement, and my brother and I just kind of followed suit. I don't think either one of us really knew what we were going to do, so we just kind of went with the family business. He is a police officer in DC, and I kind of took another route in the criminal justice system and worked a lot in our detention centers. I worked for the Pitt County Sheriff's Office for about 4 years, and then I worked at the North Carolina Department of Public Safety for another 3 years before coming back to Greenville to work at our MCO here. So I started with the Sheriff's Office in 2009, and it was probably around 2013 in the spring that I really was having a hard time holding it together. And I'm happy that I'm sharing this story tonight too, because I think that my story is so common. So many people will just overload their plate, right? We just will take on too much and we can't say no. And I am one of those people. And so back in 2013, I was getting ready to finish at ECU. I was going to school full time, and I was working at the Pitt County Detention Center full time.
Wow.
It was not uncommon for me to go to work at 7 p.m., wake up at 7 a.m., hit an 8 a.m. class on campus, stay there till about 1 or 2 in the afternoon, come back, maybe sleep for a couple of hours. But I also have, and I talk a lot about this too, alarm anxiety that, sometimes just knowing the alarm is going off, you're like, oh gosh, I just don't want to sleep through it. So you never really fall into your REM cycle. You never really get that solid sleep. So that sleep was always a really big challenge for me. And then especially when I was working shift work like that and trying to go to school and maintain everything, it was really, really challenging. So I was just at work one night. It just seemed like it was going to be a regular afternoon. It was actually in the afternoon. And I had been kind of walking through the block and everybody always, we kind of giggle when I tell this story because I've told it so many times, but what actually triggered me that day was a piece of cornbread. We would be passing out lunch trays, and they would take their trays, and there was someone that was supposed to go around and check and make sure that, everything was on the tray. So, I have a young lady, hey, officer.
Was this in a corrections
Yes,
context?
this was in the detention center.
Okay.
So she calls she calls for me, and I go over there, and she says, I didn't get my cornbread. And, when you have so many other things going on, now I'm sure this piece of cornbread was very important to this young lady, and I was going to get her some cornbread. I had even asked, I said, are you sure? Because sometimes they would, take the cornbread and say they didn't get cornbread, just so, it was just a lot of stress all at once on this day. And so for some reason, I just snapped, like, I'm done. I can't do this. I'm done. And, I stormed out of there, and let me tell you how difficult it is to storm out of a building that you have to wait for someone else to open up a door to get through. So, you're storming to one door, and I'm like, let me get out of here, And so I kind of get up in the tower, and I'm gathering all my belongings, and my coworkers are kind of up there like, is she okay? And I'm just, cursing up and down. I'll be honest, it was not a pretty moment. It was not my most gracious moment, but I was just so overwhelmed and so stressed. And I called my dad. My dad was working at the Pitt County Sheriff's Office because he did retire when we lived in Pennsylvania, but then decided he couldn't get enough. So he decided he was going to come back and be a bailiff. So I called him, and I just said, I'm letting you know I'm walking out of work. I'm done. I'm not coming back. I can't do this anymore. And I left. And I'm so thankful for truly just the response of the Pitt County Sheriff's Office, because I was storming out before I was even able to leave the building. My lieutenant stopped me, was like, just come sit down. Let's just talk about it. Let's figure this out. I still was just decided I needed to leave. I just needed to get out of there. I was starting to have like panic attacks, and, just breathing really heavy. And so I left the building, and I got in my vehicle. And when I went outside, I just happened to notice that there were a lot of my coworkers out there, and they just happened to be surrounding my vehicle. And no one was going to let me leave. So I was like, all right, that's fine, whatever. And so I just got in the car, and I had a jacket, and I just put it over my head, and I just kind of sat there and just trying to just gather myself and forget the world for a minute. So my dad finally did show up, and oddly enough, I wouldn't even open my car door for my father. I only opened the door once Mama came, because I needed Mama there. And and I was just so thankful that they didn't let me drive, because I was in a panic. Who knows what could have happened? So my safety came first. And they told me that I was going to have to, take some time off, but also have to get some type of medical clearance to come back and talk to a therapist. Very scary. Had never experienced anything like that in my life, but and got asked, a lot of questions. We went through my ACEs, just really just trying to find out, where is this coming from?
And just for people who don't know, an ACE is
Yeah.
an adverse childhood experience. It's how much trauma you've had growing up.
Yeah, we went all the way back to the beginning, and we're just trying, see where this came from. And it's interesting. I was diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder that day, and I was 23 years old, but I can recall being in about 4th grade and complaining about having stomach aches, and my mom taking me to the hospital and saying, no, you don't understand, it just burns, it hurts, and not realizing until I was 23 that was anxiety that I was experiencing at a very young age. And of course, the doctor, being a young kid, oh, she's fine, she's just making this up. And so it was never addressed. And so I wish I did have earlier interventions. I wish I would have known this when I was a kid, because I feel like I could have been able to hopefully manage it better when I was an adult, but I didn't, and I couldn't. And so I did eventually, because I knew if I could just finish school, I said, I didn't care what I wanted to do. I would wait tables. I just can't stay up all night and go to school all day. And so that was really, like I mentioned to you earlier, like my self-care, recognizing like the way that I'm operating right now isn't working for me. And I have to take a step back and look at myself and make some changes so that I am just healthy, mind, body, and soul. And so, I was on a lot of medications too when I was there, medications to help me sleep, medications to help me, wake up, medications for, tension headaches from all of the stress and my shoulders and neck. And Really, once I was able to get back on a regular routine, I was able to go off of all those medications. I do, and that's not to say that I don't have anxiety still. I consider it kind of in remission at the time. And really what we had to address, because I started seeing a provider that was fantastic, and finding that provider that actually listens to you is so incredibly rare, unfortunately. But she sat me down and she was like, Tiffany, do you think that you have anxiety, or like, how are you sleeping? Because if you're not sleeping well at night, you're going to be more anxious throughout the day. And like I said, I've never been able to really sleep well. And then just having my schedule kind of, constantly changing and staying up at night. And, that was so challenging. So really addressing the insomnia and getting me that restful night of sleep every night was able to make me feel so much better throughout the day, that I was able to, go off a lot of those medications. And again, not to say that that was for everybody. And,
Sure.
there may come a point in life again in the future where I will need those medications, and I will gladly go back to my doctor and have that conversation. But, really finding out if we can just fix this, if we can fix this sleep, that could help you.
Mm,
And it did. It really did. And that wasn't easy either. I went through a lot of medications, Ambien, which was very challenging. I had a lot of side effects. That's a hypnotic. A lot of times, people on Ambien will get up and sleepwalk, and I was getting up and turning on the stove and making pasta at 11 o'clock at night, and that was not safe either. So,
wow.
safety being really important. So, and I share this now just because, this is kind of what works for me, but not a lot of people know that Seroquel is given off label for sleep. And that is actually what I take for sleep in a low dose. And it just gets me enough to fall asleep, stay asleep. If I get up to use the bathroom, I'm not laying there, rolling all around trying to get, oh, just one more hour if I can fall asleep right now. So
Mm,
yeah, just finding the right doctor, the right combination of medications, and the right self-care is
mhm.
really what kind of brought me out of all of that. And I'm very thankful to be where I am today after all of that.
Absolutely. Boy, the mind-body connection really comes through in your story. If our body is out of whack with sleep, with diet, with whatever, we need to feel whole and to feel okay.
Yeah.
That has a huge impact. And I'm so glad you had a supportive response when you needed it. Uh, Maybe this is a stereotype, but I wouldn't have necessarily expected that in a corrections environment.
Sure.
Yeah. So that's wonderful
Yeah,
to hear.
we do.
So, yeah. So the title of your book, Simply De-escalate. What is the definition of de-escalation?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different definitions of de-escalation, but my personal definition is just diffusing that situation enough and developing enough trust and understanding with that individual that you're able to assist in that crisis, that they open up to you, that you're able to build that rapport. We always talk about rapport in CIT training and how important that is. And it is. If you don't know someone, or you do know someone, sometimes just having that mental health conversation can be very hard. It's difficult. And so just kind of knowing the right things to say and do, nonverbals, your verbals, and I know we're gonna get into all of that, but all of those are all really important to communicating to another person. Hey, this person is really trying to help me. I think I can open up to this person. I think I can tell them my secret of, I've been struggling with my mental illness, or I've been feeling suicidal. Those are all real feelings that people feel all the time. And there's still such a stigma surrounding it. And we just need to do better with listening to one another, being able to have that trust and understanding so that people don't feel like they have to hide in shame.
Mhm. And I think what comes through in your book is that it's not a simple, straightforward, do this one thing answer. It's many small parts that are sort of a tapestry that help you build rapport with that other person. Um, so let's see. Well, let's start with an example from your own experience. Is there a time when you had to de-escalate a tough situation yourself?
Sure. Many times.
Okay.
And One that really comes to mind in particular, and this was when I was working at the detention center, and I was just kind of learning these CIT skills because, the Pitt County Sheriff's Office, they are a great representation of a sheriff's office. They are just, you know,
Great.
they really are. And I'll go back to your question now. I got lost on something else. You asked
Oh,
about,
no. Example of you de-escalating.
oh yeah, de-escalating. So, there was one time in there, and it was right when we were starting to learn these CIT skills, and people were talking about, whenever you're trying to de-escalate someone, you have to kind of set your ego aside, right? And you have to be confident whenever you're doing that. You can't let things get under your skin, because in the criminal justice field, if people are going to say and do things that get under your skin. It's the nature of the beast. So if you don't take it personally, it's business. It's not personal in a lot of those situations. So, I mean, this woman one day was just cursing me up and down. I mean, calling me every name under the sun. And when you don't let things like that get to you, you kind of start to you're like, wow, that's really impressive. All of those curse words that she knows. I might learn a thing or two, but you just kind of have to separate like anything that would trigger you to be upset. And as much as she's cursing and fussing at me, and I'm just being really professional, because we need to get her dressed, we need to get her back to, general population. So I'm saying, ma'am, I know you're upset, but we really need you to get dressed. We're going back. It's almost lights out. We got to get you to your bunk. Again, she's still going. She's cursing at me. But what I noticed and what they had taught me in CIT was if they're yelling, but they're complying, that's really the goal. So was she yelling at me that entire time? Absolutely. But was she slowly getting changed into that jumpsuit that I needed her to? Yeah. So if she wanted, so had I got upset, right? Well, what would that have looked like if I got upset? Here I am wrestling this woman to the ground, trying to get her, dressed in an orange jumpsuit. You know what I mean? Like, why? But just having that patience, not taking it personal, saying, all right, well, we're going to get this done one way or the other. And being respectful at the same time. And sometimes whenever people know they've gotten under your skin, they're kind of like, ha, like, got her. So that's why you really have to, again, set that ego aside, kind of have that confidence about you, and just, again, staying respectful. You can't have those zingers or those one-liners. That's not the time or place for it. Can things be funny in that environment? Absolutely. But again, we're in a professional setting, and if, even though you're not going to be respectful, I'm going to give you that respect. And hopefully, you learn that that's the type of behavior that I need to give. But yeah, I mean, it's a challenge, but we've worked through a lot of situations like that. Just, having patience.
Right. Comment from Gary in the chat box, our executive director, Gary Kreitz. What a great role model Tiffany is. And I think it is important because our energy will affect the other person's energy. But we need to kind of have that shield, like you said, where we're not hooking into their energy if they're in that negative space. It also sounds like part of what we need to do is keep an eye on what our goal really is. It's not my goal to have this person like me or talk me up. My goal is to get her to put on her jumpsuit.
Sure.
Whatever that looks like.
Well, and why do we do CIT training, right? Well, obviously we want less consumer and officer injury rates. We also want to avoid, lawsuits. We want to avoid making an entire department look bad because of one person's bad actions. It's really important. And I'll tell you what, the people that get into the criminal justice field that stay the longest are going to be the best communicators. You are not going to have longevity in this career if you don't know how to talk to people. That's what it's about. Whenever you look at that use of force continuum, that first step is always verbal commands. If you use your words wisely, you may never have to go above that to using pepper spray or a taser or going hands-on. And then you keep that person safe. I'm safe. And we're able to facilitate what we need to do next with compliance just because of how we presented the situation to that person.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Really fascinating comment in the chat box from, let's see, Ed Ergenzinger. He attended our CIT conference and learned so much about alternative crisis response. And he's got a link in there. He's personally been handcuffed in the back of a car twice because he was in a mental health crisis. And he really appreciates the CIT response to things, a whole different approach that de-escalates the situation, just like you're talking about. Yeah. So one thing your book covers is that nonverbal communication. And one statement that really jumped out at me was, people won't accept help if my body language is not welcoming or not approachable. What are some examples of nonverbals that will turn people off?
Yeah, well, this is where all that fun CIT role play comes in. So, just scowling. I talk a little bit about RBF, and hopefully you know what that is. If you don't, Google it. But some people just kind of wear their face in a way that looks unapproachable. They might kind of have, right. Yeah. They kind of have that scowl, they have their brows furled, or, and what can that communicate? That can communicate a lot of different things. I mean, when I'm tired, I do this, but I also do this when I'm angry. So what is that communicating? And then, having that good posture is going to, again, show that confidence, make that person say, hey, this person seems like they know what they're doing. I'm going to take their help. I'm going to, whatever resources they're recommending, I'm going to listen to them. Having that open body language, right? If you have an opportunity to sit next to somebody, always getting someone to sit down is incredibly important. There's something about just that act of sitting down that immediately de-escalates a situation. But being able to sit next to another person, and if they are okay with touch, if this is a family member or someone, if they feel comfortable with you putting your hand on their shoulders, all of those things communicate so much without saying anything.
Mm-hmm. Right, exactly. How can I fix my nonverbals if I'm struggling? Maybe I'm not having a good day myself. I'm not feeling well. Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, you have to be very mindful whenever you're de-escalating someone that you're not communicating something different than what you're trying to. But I think sometimes, just like you said, I'm not in a good mood. I'm not really feeling well today. Sometimes just recognizing that I'm not in that headspace. Like if I have to go to this situation, I'm probably going to lose my patience, and it's probably going to end badly. So maybe just if you have someone else you can tap in, like, hey, do you think you can take this today? I'm just not feeling it. But you have to be in a good headspace to be able to de-escalate and help another person. That's so incredibly important. So sometimes just, but you might be the only one sometimes, right? There might not be somebody else to come and have your back, but just kind of being aware of that, am I letting my nonverbal slip? Am I, looking at my phone, right? Oh my gosh, how many times that we, somebody's, oh yeah, sure. Right. Or looking at their watch, that's communicating to me that you have to go. So do you have time for me right now? Little things like that. You really want to be fully focused on that person whenever you're de-escalating, and that everything that you say and do, verbally and non-verbally, is going to be very key to de-escalating that situation.
Yeah, that really can be a challenge. I live with anxiety too, and without even being consciously aware of it, I breathe differently when I'm a little bit anxious. I'm holding my breath or sighing, and some people have interpreted that as me, as to them it sounded like, but to me it was just
you just needed oxygen.
yeah, pretty much. That was just, I wasn't even consciously aware of it. So that's something too. We can be oblivious. So maybe I try to be open to that feedback and be conscious of it once it comes to my attention. So another point you brought up is eye contact. And I was taught to make eye contact with someone when you talk to them, that it shows you're paying attention. It's a sign of respect. Well, what is your recommendation for looking someone in the eye?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've always been taught the same things, right? Eye contact shows respect, but there's something about the eyes, isn't there? Like, you can look at somebody's eyes and tell a lot. Like, the eyes are the window to the soul. They truly are. You can tell so much by looking in someone's eyes. And what I've learned, just from, teaching a lot of times, is that there are some people who do better without eye contact. There may be some diagnoses like severe schizophrenia or anxiety. Maybe someone had trauma, a past trauma. Maybe they have autism or an intellectual developmental disability that makes that eye contact very difficult. So I always tell the CIT officers, don't take a lack of eye contact as disrespect. This person may be challenged, having a challenge with making that eye contact. I
Mhm.
know, so you don't want to force it. If someone is not giving you that eye contact, and I always tell law enforcement, there's a difference between like somebody looking down and somebody doing this, because this means they're about to run. So you better get ready to chase them. But that you need to be worried about. But someone just kind of, just really kind of bashful or shy and kind of shying away from that direct eye contact, it may just be something that's difficult. They may actually be able to hear you better without eye contact. I actually had a gentleman in class once who he wasn't on his phone, but he was kind of just like down and just kind of, scribbling. And I've learned that, sometimes just having a little sketch pad and sketching a little bit can help somebody, focus more as opposed to less. So this officer was kind of, looking down, and I didn't feel like he was really paying attention. And he did come up to me, later in the week, and he said, I know you, because, not to say that I was picking on him, but I let you know if I know you're not paying attention, right? And so he came up and he was like, hey, I know you're probably getting frustrated that you don't think I'm paying attention. He was like, but I really am. He said, my father is dealing, we're taking care of him. He has dementia right now, and my wife has bipolar disorder. So not only was he a caregiver for one individual, but two people in his life. So it was a lot of really heavy information for him to hear. And he was more comfortable. And he said, I love the information. I'm listening. I need this information. He said, but I am actually better able to focus when I'm just sitting down and kind of just like, scribbling a little bit. I'm better able to hear what you're saying. And so I said, thank you for telling me that, because, I'm all about empathy. Like I want to understand how things are from your perspective. And if we can't come to each other and say those things, there's always going to be, misunderstanding.
Right. I have a colleague with attention deficit disorder, and she finds it very helpful to just sketch and scribble. It helps her keep focused to have a notebook and pen, even if she's just drawing pictures, that somehow it helps her stay centered and present.
Yeah.
And she's paying more attention than it looks like.
Yeah.
Yeah, so many different styles out there. So what does BIF stand for? That was something in the book.
Yeah. And I went back and I looked at this and I thought I really should have elaborated on BIF a little bit, but BIF is that acronym. It stands for brief, informative, friendly, and firm. And there's an acronym to remember just about everything, but BIF is one of those ones when you're de-escalating someone to think, okay, the be brief, I need to be short. I don't want to be saying a whole lot. If this person is, maybe they're grieving over a loved one, I don't want to go in there and say, oh, you know what? I lost my aunt last year too. I was really close with my aunt. You know what? She used to make the best cinnamon rolls. Like, it's not about me right now. This person is grieving. So we want to be asking them, hey, and we can definitely relate to someone and say, I've lost an aunt that I was really close to. I can't imagine, I can imagine how difficult that is for you. But, really just saying, I'm so sorry, was your aunt, here? Did you see her a lot? Did you get to spend a lot of time with her? And just kind of letting her like talk about memories or, talking about her aunt. And that's really what people want, is just someone to listen and to be able to get it out. I say all the time, and I have my two best friends from back home, like they're my go-to girls. If I'm having a breakdown, like I know I can call them. And, and it's a lot of, and I'm their go-to, right? And they might be venting about something and I'm on the phone and I'm going, well, yeah, well, right. Like I'm trying to interrupt and they're just going and going and going. And I have to check myself and be like, Tiffany, shut up. Like just let her get this out. Like you're whatever is coming to, and we do that too. Sometimes we have so many thoughts coming up in our head that we're like, oh, I want to ask this question, but are we really listening if we're already like gathering our response? So be patient. You have a lot of time to formulate a response, and you can even leave a little bit of silence in between responses, because that gives some time for reflection. The person, you might think that person is finished talking, and then they're going to, like, you leave that little bit of silence and they kind of ponder on it for a few more seconds. And then they say, oh yeah, and also, and then you get a little bit more of the story. So being brief, talking less, listening more, incredibly important. There's a whole chapter on active listening in the book. And then informative, right? That I is offering resources, right? Offering that help. I'm here for you. Who can I call? Let's go to the doctor together. Let's make this appointment. I'll take you. So offering those resources and knowing that is really important too. And then obviously that F, friendly, you want to be respectful. You want to be understanding. You want to show that empathy. And being firm, which isn't, being mean. There's a difference between being firm and being mean, but being firm is just, I'm serious about this and we're taking this very seriously. And, I'm dedicated to your well-being and we're going to make sure that you get through this. So that BIF is just a really quick acronym to remember. And not to digress, but, and I want to make sure that people know this too, because we talk about it in CIT training and it's just so important for everyone to know, is HALT M. Are you hungry? Are you angry? Are you lonely? Are you tired? Or do you need medication? Those are all of those things that can trigger a mental health crisis. Obviously hunger. I've been hangry before. If I, hadn't had something to eat in a very long time and I was starting to maybe experience, signs of psychosis, that hunger could have been a trigger. Anger, I always say that anger is a secondary emotion, but a lot of people respond in anger. And we kind of have to get underneath and say, okay, well, what's underneath this anger that's really going on? Is it sadness, fear, shame, embarrassment, guilt? Like there's a lot of other feelings under here that we need to, kind of look at. That L, that loneliness. We know that loneliness, there are a lot of people, when people don't have those support systems, life, especially living with a mental illness, is just that much more challenging. Tired. We talked a little bit about sleep, that lack of sleep, not getting enough sleep, getting too much sleep, that can always be, a sign of a mental health crisis as well. And then, we add that M on the end there, HALT M, for medication, because we sometimes need to ask people, have you been taking your medication? Are you off medication? Is there medication you should be taking? Have you seen a doctor before? So just asking those questions are going to be really important too.
I've heard of that in terms of a self-check too. If I'm feeling off, those are questions to ask myself. Am I hungry, angry, lonely, or tired? I always like that HALT. That's an acronym that sticks.
Yeah.
Comment from Dawn on Facebook. Our high school students would benefit greatly from a de-escalation course.
Oh, I'm so glad. I'm so glad that you brought up youth. Because we have a wonderful organization here locally. I'm going to give a shout out to Liz Lyles with Daughters of Worth. She does something called Glam Girls, where she goes to the local middle schools and high schools each month, and she holds about an hour session, and she just has different types of resources and presenters and speakers and inspirational people coming in and just sharing. So she asked me if I would come in. So last week was actually the first time that I presented this information to youth. Definitely a lot different than adults. But whatever was said, and we talked a little bit about, listening, and we talked about, if you were struggling, who could you reach out to? What about your school guidance counselor? What about Miss Liz here? Who's somebody that you could reach out to? And whatever we were talking about, whatever was said in that hour session, they were all girls, when those girls went back to class, there was one that lingered and came up to us and said, well, what if you want to talk to somebody, but you're afraid that someone will call CPS.
Wow.
This is why I don't work with kids, because I'm already like, do you need to come home with me, sugar? Because I got to. But children hurting is that's one of my challenges. And so I just kind of tapped in Liz, and I'm like, hey, what do we do? And she said, and she was wonderful, and, made this girl feel so safe, and was like, oh, we're going to come back tomorrow and talk to you. I'm going to bring you your favorite, lunch. What do you want for lunch? And this girl just had that to look forward to the next day. And, someone was going to hear her, and just letting her know, like, We just need to make sure you're safe. That's what this is all about.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's definitely different presenting this information to kids, but I think they need to hear it just as much as adults, for sure. And like we talk about early interventions all the time. So the earlier you can use these skills, the better, the more emotionally intelligent these kids are going to be as they get older.
Right.
Kids grow up to be adults. I saw it. Yes, Paulina, they do.
I love your example of how to respond to a child who wants to de-escalate a situation, but they're not in control of it. If their parent is the one who's escalating and out of control, how do they respond? They're going to need some additional help. So I'm glad you brought that up. Got to be prepared for that possible response, and how are we going to reach that child and not make them feel like there might be worsening problems at home because they talk to someone. Yeah. So you talk a lot in the book about empathy and focusing on another person's feelings during a conflict. It's hard to overstate the importance of empathy and validation. Could you talk about those a little bit?
Yeah. So feelings matter, and I think everybody involved with NAMI, we kind of know that. We've all been in situations where we've needed someone just to hear us and try to understand our story. And, when we share and relate to another person's feelings, I might not be able to know exactly what you're going through, but I can identify how you're feeling. You're feeling sad, you're feeling upset, you're feeling overwhelmed. So just by communicating that to you, I can see that you're so overwhelmed. I really want to help you. Is there something I can do? And then that person says, oh my gosh, I am overwhelmed. And this person recognized that I'm overwhelmed. They're willing to help me. They want to hear about how I'm overwhelmed. Let me get it out. And, if this is someone they already have that relationship with, it may come very easily. If not, you might have to work on that rapport a little bit more. And it can be anything, right? Oh, I really like that shirt. Where did you get that from? Oh yeah, I shop there all the time. That's a really nice shirt you have on. Or, oh, look at your dog. I love dogs. What's your dog's name?
Mhm.
Building that rapport and just letting, just showing that you're human. We're all human. And so many times in those situations that need de-escalated, there's the consumer, and then there's the person who's above them, right? Who's like, you just need to do what I say. I know what's best for you. But we know we have to meet people where they're at. We have to wait for people to be ready. We can't rush these situations. We have to make them feel safe in order to want that help. And so that empathy is really important. But unfortunately, empathy doesn't come naturally to everyone. Empathy is truly a gift. A lot of times I do say that it can become a skill, because obviously I'm trying to teach this, but there are some people who just have that natural, empathy. They just get it. And then there's other people who kind of need to work at it. They're usually not the feelings type of people, but they can get there. And even if they're not the feelings type of people, if they can recognize the emotion in another person and say, I want to help you, that might just be enough to, bring down that wall and get that person the help they need.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a great point. Just recognizing the emotion so that you can say, I can tell how concerned you are about your family. I can tell how angry you are.
Mm-hmm.
Um, just to sort of honor their feelings. As much as you want to rush towards compliance or meeting whatever the goal is, you're right. If we can focus on those feelings, that has to happen first when
Yeah.
someone's upset.
Yeah. Get yourself a feeling wheel, put it on the fridge, and just get used to identifying those emotions. They're important. We all have feelings, we all have emotions. So being able to, like I said, see that in another person, it really is just such a sign of emotional intelligence to be able
Mhm.
to get through those situations so naturally. And they can come naturally with practice. But again, some people it's going to be more natural for than others. And so it feels uncomfortable for a while. But sometimes you have to feel that little bit of uncomfort to get to the other side of where you need to be to help some of these people. So empathy is probably one of my favorite topics to talk about, because I just think that's really the key of it all, is
Mhm.
just empathy for your fellow man.
Mhm. You made a comment just now that it can be uncomfortable, but you can get there, you can learn and get more comfortable. That's such a good point, especially for men, I would think, who are in law enforcement. They're raised and just some types of families are raised not to be emotional, to be stoic, that's the ideal. So if you're raised that way, you don't get that much practice
Yeah.
identifying your feelings and expressing your feelings and
Yeah.
resolving them in a healthy way. So then when you have your job maybe hinges on empathizing and helping someone else with their emotions, yeah, there's a learning curve.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So what is emotional validation?
So validating somebody's emotions are so important too. Just saying that, you know, how you feel, even though you feel like it's not normal in that moment, right? Some people, you know, feel like, well, I'm suicidal. I'm not supposed to feel that way. I can't say anything. But when you, again, recognize that emotion, validate, and then just say something like, you know, you're going through a lot right now, or based on what you've told me, why you're suicidal, you know, anybody could become suicidal with this set of circumstances. You know, you are facing these challenges right now, but we can get to the other side. So you're not the only person that's ever experienced this. And you're not going to have to go through it alone, because if we're that person de-escalating, we have made a commitment to be with that person until the end, until we found them another level of care. So yeah, just validating, making people feel seen and feel heard is so important. So important.
Absolutely. You once worked at a boot camp after school program for juvenile offenders in Washington County. What was that like? You must have some stories.
So that was the leader program. And I had to like really go back and start. I was like, I have not thought about this. This was my first job out of college. But it was called the leader program. It's called Leadership Enhanced Attitude Development Educational Rehabilitation. And it was really, it was kind of a step between juvenile probation. It looks a little bit differently in Pennsylvania than it does here. We had juvenile probation, and then obviously you have your juvenile detention centers, you know, one extreme to the other, but there really wasn't anything in between. So the juvenile probation department in Washington County, where I worked in Pennsylvania, introduced this leadership program. And what that was is we would pick the kids up from after school. They were court appointed to be there. They had to serve, they had to receive 90 days or earn 90 days in order to graduate from the program. So that's not to say that if you have 60 days that we couldn't, you know, you got a bad grade in school or you mouthed off to a teacher and, oh, sorry, you're back to zero now. So it wasn't just a 90 and out, it was really based on their own merit. But we helped develop, you know, just self-esteem, social skills, independent living skills. We helped them with their academics. We would do tutoring. We had a kitchen. So we would go to a school where we would meet in the evenings, and we would go to the kitchen and we would make our meals and we would like eat as a family. And, you know, how many kids in programs like these have never just sat down for dinner at a family dining table and had a meal? And so just having that and teaching table manners, you know, all of those basic things that, you know, we think that they get that at home, but not every child does. And so that really was eye-opening to really mental health and what goes on behind closed doors, and learning about, you know, childhood trauma and all of the things that happen, and so many times just because of the situations that the cards that these kids were dealt, you know, their lives were just incredibly more difficult because they just didn't have you know, the upbringing to learn just some of these basic skills that we think are basic, but sometimes are not so basic. So, you know, I've worked with so many amazing kids in that program. I mean, kids that have been dismissed and brushed to the side and told, you know, you're never going to amount to anything. And then you learn about them, and they, again, you have to have that rapport. You know, I would go pick these kids up on the first day, day one, and let me tell you, their body language was telling me that they did not like me. And they'd get in my little minivan and get in the back and look out the window and give me all the attitude. But, you know, once we and it was fine, and had I scolded them, right? And I'm also, this is a really good tip too. I'm an ask, don't tell person. And I did this with the youth that I worked with last week. I said, hey, will you come here and sit down? And the little girl got up and she came and sat down, but she kind of gave me this face, like, I don't really like the way you said that. And so I said, well, I'm glad that you demonstrated that for us, that you didn't like that. And so I said, okay, well, let me ask you, hey, do you mind coming over here and having a seat for me? Asking, and oh yeah, sure. It was my choice at that point. I wasn't told to do something. It was my choice. People are going to be so much more likely to go along with a plan, especially if it's a plan, a crisis plan, right? If it was their choice, right? Especially for like substance use disorder, right? We can say, oh my gosh, your life's falling apart, your family, nobody trusts you anymore, and you're spending all this money and you're losing everything, and you got to go to rehab right now. Well, that might be that rock bottom from your perspective, but that person isn't there yet. That person has to learn it in their own time. And, with substance use disorder, especially, it can take a lot of time. And, relapse is part of recovery. Even in mental health, relapse is part of recovery. But
Sure is.
yeah, I'm sorry, I'm talking about a whole lot of other things, but I just got so many good things coming in from CIT training. Like, oh, I've got to talk about that. I've got to talk about this. But yeah, I mean, communication is everything. Communication is everything.
A lot of good pearls of wisdom there. I support that. And I especially like the idea of giving people choices, asking questions instead of giving them a mandate. Because if they don't believe in the plan, if they haven't said, yes, I'm going to do this, I will commit to this, what's the plan worth anyways?
Right. And we always talk about too in CIT training, finding the win-win. What do I want, and what does this person want? And kind of thinking, okay, well, I know you want to, make a phone call, but we have to, finish up this paperwork really quickly. Let's finish up this this paperwork for, this inpatient that we're going to. Once we finish this out, we'll sit here in the lobby and I'll let you make a phone call. So it's kind of like, I'm getting a little something that I need you to obviously fill out this paperwork, but you want to make a phone call. So let me use that. Let me use it as my leverage. Okay, I have a cell phone right here. I'll let you make a call. Let's finish this paperwork. And then we'll go ahead and call your family member and let them know where you are. So that, then everybody wins, right? It's good when everybody wins. Everybody, and some people may not consider it a win because it is, what's the word I'm looking for? Not settling, when you compromise, right? You kind of have to compromise in there. And again, it takes time, but you can get to it. A win-win's always going to be beneficial for both parties.
That's an important point. It may take a little more time, but look at the journey, how much calmer the journey will be to get to that point. I want to shift away from our interview part of the show. We're a little bit past the halfway point, and we've got quite a few questions lining up already in our Q&A box. So
sure.
We'll pivot away real quick. First, I want to give a big shout out to our heroes working behind the scene. We've got Gail Pruitt, our psychiatric nurse on Facebook, Paulina Mendez, our wonderful intern on the chat box. And of course, my deep thanks to Gary Kreitz, our executive director, for always being there. And of course, thank you so very much to Tiffany for writing the book and for all that you do and for spending your evening with us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
It is my pleasure. So now for our video of the week, we're going to take a look at de-escalation in law enforcement. This is a video that I found from NAMI, California. They've got lots of wonderful programs out there, and we are going to check this video out.
Law enforcement officers are dedicated. Every day they put on a uniform and deal with everything from pesky kids on skateboards to bank heists. And while officers always strive to do their best, sometimes they encounter situations more suited for social workers, like dealing with mental health crisis calls, which is why we have crisis intervention teams. CIT programs teach law enforcement officers how to safely de-escalate mental health crisis situations. In fact, law enforcement agencies that have CIT programs in place have reported as much as an 80% decrease in officer injuries during mental health crisis situations. Not only do CIT programs educate officers, they also bring together community members and mental health care providers to offer convenient options for treatment and to reduce the number of repeated calls for police service, saving officers valuable time. Take the next step in helping your community better respond to mental health crisis calls. Learn more about CIT programs by visiting NAMI.org/CIT.
All right, nice little CIT one-on-one program there for you. And all right, we're going to jump into our questions. We've got 5 lined up already. This is from Becky. Could you please share what BIF stands for again?
Sure. It stands for brief, informative, friendly, and firm. And if you just look up BIF communication in Google, you'll be able to find a whole lot of more information on that too.
All right. From Gail Pruitt, do you have any ideas about how our listeners across the state can access someone who could teach a course or a class to high school students about de-escalation?
I would hope that maybe somebody through their local MCO would be able to come and do that. I mean, that's definitely something that I do, in our local community, is teaching de-escalation to everyone. And like I said, I've just taught that to kids. So yeah, I would say contact your local managed care organization, and they may be able to link you with someone. I do CIT, but I'm kind of the jack of all trades. I do a lot of other things too. So, I mean, I personally would have no problem, teaching like an hour course to youth or anybody that was interested in learning the information. It's valuable information.
So if you're lucky enough to live in Pitt County, your MCO, managed care organization, is Trillium. There's also VIA, Alliance, Sand Hills. You can look it up online to see what serves your area, which organization. All right. This is a little bit of a story. I'm the parent. My adult kid got triggered and wanted me to change a situation immediately that was partially out of my control. How do you de-escalate when the adult child wants something I can't give and the kid is spiraling and getting threatening? Also, empathy does not work with this person.
Okay. So, and again, I'm not familiar with all of the resources across the state of North Carolina. I know what I would do if someone had called me and told me that situation here in Pitt County, and I most likely would probably refer them to a mobile crisis team. We have a wonderful mobile crisis team here locally who can come and assist in situations like that. I also refer a lot of people to the Real Crisis Center, and I refer a lot of people to 988 now as well. I'm not sure if you all know that 988 is up and running. And it's hard because I do tell people, if you dial 911, to request a CIT officer. I mean, that's obviously really important. But we are still addressing mental health, which is a medical disorder, a medical concern, with the criminal justice system. If I'm having a heart attack, I'm going to, have an ambulance come. If I have a mental health crisis, law enforcement's coming. And depending on, again, the actions, as you said, he may be acting out, cursing, maybe getting aggressive. You don't know what could happen in that situation. So I know that can be, difficult sometimes for family members to call 911. But if you have to, request a CIT officer, because that person has come through the 40-hour CIT training. Hopefully they have those skills to be able to de-escalate the situation. If they don't, typically they are going to call their local mobile crisis team in as well. So that's why a lot of times I say, if you have a relationship with your local mobile crisis and you can just bypass that whole criminal justice system, we are all about jail diversion and CIT, and we don't want anyone ending up in our jails or prisons as a result of a mental health concern. So that would probably be my route. Yeah. Hope that was helpful.
That sounds like an excellent plan. If you'd like to find out if there are additional options in your area, the NAMI North Carolina helpline is available during business hours. I'm sure it will appear in our chat soon and on Facebook. You can call our helpline team, and they have this enormous Bible-sized manual, and they've got all the resources around the state listed, and they can help you. They can inform you what's going on in your area that might be helpful with that very difficult situation. Thank you for asking. Question from Gary. Tell us a little more about crisis intervention teams around the state. What is it? Who runs it, etc.?
Yeah, sure. So CIT training is actually ran through the local managed care organization, the Trilliums, the East Points, the Alliance, all of those. So every area is different. I can tell you in Pitt County, we probably do 3 CIT trainings a month. I know some MCOs who do 3 CIT trainings a year. We probably have the largest training department of all the MCOs. I don't quote me on that, but we have a huge training department devoted specifically to CIT training, mental health first aid training, and QPR training. And just for those of you who don't know a lot about CIT, it's a 40-hour training. We talk about we have a lot of educational presentations. We talk about everything from trauma-informed care, depression, anxiety, bipolar, schizophrenia, ADHD, OCD. We talk about substance use disorder, autism, dementia, and obviously dementia is not necessarily a mental illness, but because it affects the brain and you see those behaviors, officers need to know how to respond in those as well. So it's a 40-hour training. They get all of that education. We go out on site visits in the community. I'm so happy site visits have started again. We get to go out and meet consumers, and we get to see people who aren't in crisis, which is really important because law enforcement sees people at their worst all the time. And that's another reason why I also really stress on community policing. Is you have to have these positive relationships in your community when people are out of crisis just as much when they're in crisis. Just saying, you see someone at Sheetz, you're getting your coffee, hey, how you doing? How you been? I'm glad you're feeling better. I'm glad we could help, or just like, how's your kid? How's life? Just touching base is really important. So just that community policing component of it. We also spend a lot of time doing role play. And if there is anybody in Eastern North Carolina NAMI who wants to come and be a role player for CIT training, call me as soon as possible. Yes, we do talk about IDD too, Nancy. We talk about intellectual developmental disabilities as well, and traumatic brain injuries, autism. We definitely cover those as well. But role playing is a really big part of training. We do that later in the week. They do have to pass 2 role plays in order to complete training. So we will typically give them a scenario, and then we have a role player who will act out a mental health crisis, and we will rate their de-escalation skills, everything they did that was good, everything they did that, maybe they need to work on. And that really just, I would say, if I could sum CIT training up in one word, it would be cathartic, because people leave that training saying, you know what, I was feeling really like burnout in my job. And now that I have these skills, this reminded me why I wanted to be a police officer again, because I wanted to be in this profession to help people. And now I feel like I can, because they have so many crisis calls. Our law enforcement officers get so many mental health crisis calls, and they want to know how to de-escalate these situations. A lot of times they just need the skills to, and they don't get a lot of it in their basic training. So that's why, having some, getting into law enforcement, having some time under your belt, and then, asking, or even, your supervisor, your chief or your lieutenant, hey, I'm really interested in the CIT training. I think I'd be a good CIT officer. Do you think I could go to training? There's one in Pitt County next week. And, because we talk a lot about people being volunteered to come versus voluntold to come. I know I don't like that word either, but we want officers in the room who really want to be there, who want to learn these skills, and who want to use them to help people in their communities.
Absolutely, they're valuable skills. Next question is from John Klein, and he's a former paramedic of many years, another first responder, and he's a previous guest on the show. What can we do to get mental health patients who are incarcerated can we get them any treatment or better treatment?
Unfortunately, no. That is one place that mobile crisis teams and things like that cannot respond. They cannot go to any of our correctional facilities. They also can't respond to any of our hospitals, because once they're at the hospital, they're considered to be under the care of the hospital. And unfortunately, when it comes to the criminal justice system, we have to accept the standard of care that the state is giving us in that case. Now, I will say for people leaving prison, it's very important if there are any case managers, any mental health staff that can kind of let them know when they're leaving, especially if they're taking medication in the facility. Hey, we know you're getting out, we're getting your home plan together. You're going to be going to, Craven County. Okay, that's Trillium Health Resources. Here's Trillium's phone number. You'll be able to, and just prepare them with a lot of these resources so that when they leave, they have a starting point. They've been on medication for possibly years, and they're not going to all of a sudden go off their medication, which could result in another possible incarceration. So really important to be, unfortunately, we can't do anything inside, but linking them to the services once they're out is going to be really important as well.
That's a great point. And what inspired you to write your book?
Really, my friends in other states who are like, I wish I could come to your training. I need to know this stuff. And, recognizing that pastors, bus drivers, transit workers, medical professionals, nurses, teachers, everybody needs to know these skills. Why are we just limiting it to law enforcement? And so I really, as much as I love what I do, I love working in Eastern North Carolina and the people that we serve, but I wanted a bigger impact. I was like, we need to get this around the world. I sold a book in Australia last month. I was so excited. I was like, yes, just getting this information out. And, even just giving books away, I feel like when I give a book away, like I get it back, because then that person shares those skills and they talk about that book with another person, and then they go buy it. You know what I mean? So that's what's really important to me, is just getting this information out so that everyone knows, because I truly think that if we could become better at communicating, we could heal the world. That's what we need. Everything that, all of the things that are going on in the world today, if we could just all come to the table and try to come up with a win-win and try to empathize and actively listen to each other, the world would be such a better place. So I want everyone to learn these skills. I hope you all, buy the book and, really just try to implement these in your life, because they really do improve, your relationships.
Absolutely.
So important.
Question from Facebook. How can I get a signed copy of your book?
Sure. I do have some author copies. I have a website. If you go to TiffaniHerring.com, you'll link to my bio. You can do a contact. If you just want to do a contact me, we'll figure out how to get you a signed copy. I'm really excited if people are requesting signed copies. I'd be more than happy to send you one. Thank you.
I thought you might appreciate that question. So, comment from Gail. I love your comments on communication, empathy, active listening. That is the recipe for world improvement. So right on.
Amen.
Love it. So many nice comments and links in the chat box. Thanks everyone. Ed, again, for a link to therapeutic alternatives, and Paulina, our intern, had a link to a really wonderful documentary. I'm going to have to check that out. Well, there's a lull in the questions right now. Feel free to keep asking. We've got as much time as we need, in other words, till 8:30. Join us next week for Thursdays with NAMI. We'll be looking at the healthy mind and the aging body. We've got guest host, my wonderful executive director boss, Gary Kreitz. He'll be leading the show while I watch TV and eat bonbons at home. Gary will be discussing the challenges of mental health as we age. Depression and anxiety are on the rise among mature Americans, and suicide rates among older men is among the highest in the nation. Scary stuff. Join our conversation with two experts in the field. We're all going to get there if we're lucky, so please tune in. Also, please fill out our survey. If you're on Zoom, when you close out of the Zoom program, a survey will magically appear. Please take the 3 minutes to fill that out. It helps us so much. I'll be forever in your debt. It helps us improve over time and show our funders what we do. You can also make a suggestion about what you'd like to see, if you'd like to be a guest or shoot a video for us. Fill out the survey, keep in touch. We'd love, love, love to hear from you. And more awesome comments in the chat. Tiffany, is there anything we haven't asked or anything you'd like to say before we wrap up?
I don't think so. I put my information in the chat there. Simply De-escalate on Facebook and Instagram. I do share a lot of resources up there, inspirational stuff, self-care. I love some self-care, so be prepared for that. TiffanieHerring.com, again, if you want to be linked to, I think someone did share the Amazon link. But just really good tips, and I'm available if you want to message me directly. If you have any questions, either on my website or one of my social media platforms, I'd be glad to answer those for you. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Okay, I do see another question in the chat from Ed. How common is it to have private organizations offer crisis response and transfer services like this one? And he mentions therapeutic alternatives.
Therapeutic alternatives. So they are a service provider that falls under the managed care organization. So if someone does receive services through the managed care organization, one of those providers may be therapeutic alternatives. Does that make sense? Did I answer your question?
I think so.
I'm not sure if they offer any type of de-escalation training. I will also say for those of you in Trillium's catchment area, if you go to mylearningcampus.org, you can create a free account, and there is a 1-hour de-escalation training on there where you can actually get a certificate when you finish it. So I'll put that here in the chat too, if any of you want to check that out.
But that's only available to people in the eastern part of the state who are served by Trillium, or anyone?
It's supposed to be Trillium's catchment area. I'm not sure if anyone can go and create an account, but I'll just tell you that I do know that is offered through Trillium.
Okay.
And it's free. So who doesn't love free training? We need all the free training we can get.
NAMI is all about free. We do free trainings too. Question from John Klein. Do you train many firefighters and ambulance personnel?
We haven't. So I am hoping and praying that we can get like 2 more coordinators in the next year, because we do have some gaps and needs in our area. We stay really busy with law enforcement, and it's different in each area. We have a southern region. I work out of Greenville, so we have a Hosky. We have a gentleman in a Hosky. We have myself, and then we have someone in our southern region. And you can imagine that first responders in a Hosky deal with a little bit different circumstances than the ones in Wilmington. So well, I'll come back to the question. I'm sorry. I lost my train of thought. What was the question?
Do you offer, in your trainings, do you have many firefighters or ambulance personnel?
Yeah, so and again, it's different. We've trained a lot of law enforcement in our northern region and Trillium's catchment area. So we train a lot of firefighters. They're kind of just getting on board, but we do offer this training to 911 telecommunicators, firefighter and EMS, and law enforcement. And then we also I do a reoccurring training for the Department of Public Safety Corrections in Pitt County once a month. So yeah, we will train any first responder. We are training, all of those demographics right now, but I would say we do definitely want to see more CIT trainings with some of these other first responders other than law enforcement, because they need them. They need the skills too.
All right. Well, we've got another lull in the questions. Gail,
I wish I was clonable too, Gail. I wish I could split in two sometimes.
it's hilarious. Think of how much you get done. Question from Kirsten Courtney. Does NAMI/other groups have support groups for families of incarcerated family members or incarcerated family members with mental health issues, developmental issues, etc.? That is a really interesting question, Kirsten. We are open to having tailored groups. There was a NAMI Durham group for people who have been recently incarcerated. I think it was called On the Outside. We had an intern developing that, and it kind of faded away when the intern's tenure ended, but I'd be very open to that. We have targeted programs for the LGBTQ community, support groups, a stress and anxiety group for African Americans. We've got a Spanish speaking support group. So we're very interested in that. If you fill out our survey and leave your information, if you'd like to be part of building that, just let us know.
Yeah, and I mean, even if there isn't a specific support group you can find for incarcerated individuals, I mean, just coming to a family support group, you would learn a lot for being able to help your loved one.
Thank you. That's an excellent point. And you probably, if you try out a few, you definitely will find family members who also have an incarcerated loved one.
Yep.
And of course, virtual support groups in North Carolina and in other NAMI areas are open no matter where you live. That's the beauty of going virtual, is you can tune in with a group in California, a group in North Carolina, wherever you want to hop in. So the opportunities are much broader than they were just a few years ago. Oh, another question popping up. What is the mental health situation most likely for law enforcement to face? From April. Thank you, April.
A mental health crisis that law enforcement is most likely to face?
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay, so I can interpret this either way. I can say a crisis for themselves as law enforcement, or crisis that they are going to be de-escalating. Because, and I'll answer both. But, you know, law enforcement definitely is at a higher rate of suicide and depression and substance use disorder. And that's definitely something that we cover in CIT training about how self-care is so important, because they are at a higher rate of experiencing mental health crisis or suicidal ideations just because of the job that they do. So that's really important to know. I would say law enforcement's most common that they use a lot of these skills would be domestics. I know that's probably one of the most challenging calls that they get. And then a lot of times with domestics, you're dealing with, abuse or some other type of trauma. So being able to recognize, recognize when somebody is struggling and getting them the resources too. But I would say the domestic violence calls are probably the ones that I hear them bring up examples of most often.
It's interesting you say that. I once did a ride-along in Toledo, Ohio, with a police officer, and his name was Abraham, and he was so good at that. We did 2 calls together. One was a young man whose friends had stolen pizza that his family had paid for. And so his friends were hanging out in the driveway, and the pizza driver just hands over the pizza to them, and they rode away on their bikes. So the police officer was called, and he had to talk with the young man about making choices and how his friends will lift him up or pull him down, and which direction did he want to go. And the other one was a domestic violence situation. He asked the gentleman, well, not such a gentleman that night, to vacate the premises, and he talked to the woman about, what was available for help, how to get a restraining order, and express concern for the young child who was there, who was witnessing all kinds of drama. So it was, I was like, this is a social worker type role. And at that time I was very surprised.
Yeah. Law enforcement wears many different hats.
Mm-hmm. Oh, interesting comment from Gary. Sam Cochran, who's probably the expert on CIT in the United States, has said that the #1 indicator for a successful CIT is a strong NAMI affiliate in the area. That's interesting.
I agree with that.
Very good. All right. Well, we might be coming to an end. Do you have any last closing thoughts you want to share with us, Tiffany? It's been an absolute pleasure.
I don't. I just, if there are any first responders that might be interested, especially if you're in our catchment area or any other catchment area, definitely contact your local managed care organization. Because if you're in this live tonight, I know you probably have a heart for this. So we need more first responders like you if you are a first responder. And mental health first aid training is really good too. I kind of want to give that a little nod because that is a shorter training to teach lay individuals on how to intervene during a mental health crisis. And that curriculum has recently changed to include a lot more de-escalation and self-care. So I would contact your local MCO and ask about mental health first aid training. You may be able to attend a course through them just to get a little bit more of these skills if you're not a first responder. Yeah, good point. That's an 8-hour training, and I found it really helpful, really confidence building too. So, all right. I think we're kind of coming to a close. We go as long as the questions go and kind of go with the energy of the group. Tiffany, you've been absolutely fabulous, so helpful and instructive. Thank you.
And we had a lot of people RSVP tonight and a good sized crowd here. Thank you for that. Thank you to our volunteers. And please remember, if you want to talk with someone who understands, if you need de-escalation yourself or help with de-escalating your own life, please reach out to us at NAMI. We understand and we'll be there for you. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks, everyone. Have a good week. We'll see you next time. Bye.